Hare Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. So today we're going to be discussing a very important topic. We discussed some of it yesterday also, but today we're going to be making everything a little bit clear and understood for people watching here who are going through this little course on Krishna consciousness. So first things first, two words are used and well known, and Srila Prabhupada, who is the founder of the Krishna consciousness movement, the Krishna consciousness movement, he specifically termed this, gave this term Krishna consciousness at the time of when Srila Prabhupada termed that. There was a lot of idea of higher consciousness being thrown around because of the hippie era. So Srila Prabhupada particularly gave the name also Krishna consciousness. And Srila Prabhupada gave many definitions of what's Krishna consciousness because there's an ethos around it, it's a culture, it in itself has so many different levels of understanding of what is Krishna consciousness. But today we'll basically define the basics of Krishna consciousness, speaking about, what exactly is it in its, just defining the two words themselves, Krishna consciousness. And so important point being that we must first understand what is consciousness, because we're talking about Krishna consciousness, as sometimes Srila Prabhupada would say, that first you become conscious and then you become Krishna conscious. So first things first, we should understand what is consciousness. Now the modern idea of consciousness is very, you could say, different, or the source of consciousness in modern biology and scientific fields is actually very different to what we understand in Krishna consciousness. Because the philosophers and the scientists and the psychologists and all of these people, they actually don't know. Their conclusion is, we don't know what consciousness is. It is there, but we don't know. So we'll start to understand a little bit of that, what the modern idea of consciousness is, or what the struggle of understanding consciousness. So in general, we can say that consciousness is a level of awareness, an experience, right? And everybody has some different level of consciousness, just like there's a different level of consciousness in India, and there's a different level of consciousness in America. In India, the consciousness may be a little bit more dharmic. In America, it may be more sense gratificatory. It may be more based on a hedonistic civilization. Now, all civilizations become hedonistic, but there's different levels of consciousness. And it's an experience, and everybody has their particular type of worldview according to the different places they are situated at, different bodies they're in, different ages. So, different levels of consciousness. So, what is consciousness? How do we define consciousness? Well, it's kind of difficult when you look at it from a scientific point of view, because science's theory is that we are brain. We're actually that everything comes from the brain and all the thoughts come from the brain. But a problem arises because as a scientist, everything is objective. Everything has to be measurable. If it's not measurable, then how can you determine what it is? So the brain itself is objective, it's physical, and it's describable, right? So you can eventually, scientists understand that eventually you'll have systems in order to monitor every part of the brain. Every single part of the brain you'll be able to monitor. But there's an interesting phenomena that arises because we say, the brain is the source of all thoughts and everything comes from the brain and we are the brain. Then the problem comes that something of completely opposite nature comes about from the brain, apparently. So the hard problem for consciousness is this, that we have this physical brain, we have something that's objective and that's describable, that's measurable, and out of that, if we're considering that to be the source, arises something subjective, something that's you can't measure, something that's private, is not physical, it's a metaphysical. That is, what is that? That is our feelings, that is our level of thought, our worldview. How can you measure someone's worldview? How can you see, how does this person see this world? The two people don't see the sunset the same way. because we have different experiences. So this is called quali in the terms of scientists. You've got your brain and then you've got the quali. So the quali, it seems that how is it possible? How is it that something physical, describable, objective gives rise to something that's completely of opposite nature, which we can't measure now and we can't describe, and it's metaphysical? So this is the hard problem for consciousness, that people are not able to understand, because the idea was that by people like British biologist T.H. Huxley. So basically he's saying here that all states of consciousness are caused by molecular changes of the brain. So anytime there's a change of mood, it's just a change of molecular changes in the brain. So on basis of this theory, the consciousness is merely a byproduct of a properly functioning brain. And so this is the idea that the brain is the source of everything, and all our moods and everything is dependent on that. But then we see this hard problem of consciousness arise, in which you have a subjective experience, you have a private and unmeasurable experience. A private means here not physical experience. So it's an interesting problem, and people say, well, we don't know. That main philosopher who is here, I have his names, where is it here? His name is Dan Chalmers. Huh? Chalmers. David Chalmers says that it's hard to understand, because we see that we just like a robot, technically the brain doesn't need consciousness to function. Just like a robot identifies a light and then reacts accordingly. And so the brain is like a mechanism. It's just a bunch of chemicals that are firing, whenever there's some interaction with matter. So David Chalmers says, technically you don't need consciousness, because the brain, there's no need for the brain to there's no need for feelings to come about, actually. There's no need to have a subjective experience. You would function exactly the same. Just like a robot, you can program a robot to cook for you. So the brain is a mechanical system, because we've been able to analyze it. And so technically, these things shouldn't arise. So how do we explain it? Well, we can't. But then there's other philosophers like Dan Dennett, who argues that, this doesn't exist. There's no quality. There's no subjective experience. He just says, there's no subjective experience. It's not metaphysical. Why are you considering it? It all arises out of your logic and reason and all of this, so just don't consider it. But we're having an experience of a subjective experience. We ourselves can see that. He just says, rule the problem out. There's no problem, it's just everything comes from the brain. But then, he may say that, somehow or other, we don't have enough instruments to measure the brain and say it's like that, and we don't know where the feelings, and even then, how could you measure it? But then an interesting phenomenon arises within life when there is people who are under coma, in which they are termed brain dead. But even in such circumstances, the consciousness is going on without the brain. There is no brain, but there is consciousness. They're able to remember, and they're able to describe what they saw. There's people who are termed dead, right? Finished, done. Put him in the grave, and then they come back to life somehow. All your systems say this person is dead. The heart's not beating, the brain's not functioning. Finished, done. But all of a sudden, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes later, the body comes back to life, and then the person describes what I saw. How is he conscious? How is he conscious to remember all that experience? How is he able? The brain's not functioning, but you have memory. You have feelings. And this is not a one-off case. This is thousands of cases which people have described. And there's even cases when the heart surgeons are performing heart surgery, and you put under anesthesia, you don't have any sensory perception. There's nothing. Right now, our brain is functioning on the level of, my eyes are seeing a certain light come in, and my brain is processing that, and then I'm able to process that and then determine what is what, which object is what, right? What is the nature of this object? What is the nature of that object? And according to that, I'm reacting now. But when someone is under anesthesia, there's no sensory perception anymore. There's no input. And even the brain itself is under a state of, you can say frozen, what is the right word I'm looking for? Under the state of a level of just, there is no thoughts going, huh?
Inactivity?
Inactivity, yeah. It's in an inactive state. But it's been described by the person who's being operated on, who says that I came out of my body and I was observing all of the different things that you were doing. That I was able to see exactly each instrument you used, and she's able to recall all of the conversations they had also. I mean, you're lying down, how can you see the instruments? What is being used? So although people may come up with such an idea, we see in reality that in our own experience also, that consciousness is different from the brain. It's different. The experience we're having is not a mechanical experience. We're not like a robot. We feel, we're inspired by seeing certain things. We're not a robot. It's not just an input and an output. There's more than that. So the scientists have a hard time determining what is consciousness. Why? Because they have accepted that we are matter. We cannot accept anything that is not measurable, so actually they even reject, okay, you don't have feelings. It's just some chemicals and you're just making that up. He says that, this philosopher, he says, it's just something that you're making up. It's you're imagining your feelings. Are we imagining our feelings? You know, the love, intense love we experience in this world sometimes, or the intense pain we experience in this world sometimes, is just an imagination. It doesn't exist. You're a fool. I mean, you yourself, you have children. You say, okay, your feeling towards your children, it doesn't exist. It's imagined from your brain. So just cut the relationship. What's the problem? It's an imagination. When something is imagined, just like illusion, you could say. Just like if I see a rope to be a snake, but then you turn the light on, okay, it's not a snake, it's a rope. Then there's no more, then you're free. Right? There's no more ignorance. You're free, you understand it was illusion. You understand it was imagined in your mind, so you're not scared anymore. So same, your relationship with your child is imaginary, my dear scientist. So just cut the relationship. You realize now that it's just an imagination of the brain, just cut it. Why? Because it is real. But because you have accepted matter as the ultimate goal of your life, or being the ultimate source of your life, and you're not willing to accept any other science other than that, then you're stuck. Then you're stuck on that level. So, modern science only gets us so far. Therefore, the Vedic knowledge or the Vedic culture, it has this knowledge in full. It not only has this knowledge of material science, but more than that, it has full knowledge of the spiritual science. And so, specifically the Bhagavad Gita gives us a proper definition of what is consciousness. Here, in the second chapter, Krishna starts to define the nature of life. He defines the nature of this body. He defines the nature of one's existence, who one is. So Krishna says here that the question here, the presence of the soul is known by a symptom called consciousness. So avinashi tu tadvidhi yena sarvam idam tatam vinasham avyayasyasya nakaschit kritum arhati. That which pervades the entire body, you should know to be indestructible. No one is able to destroy that imperishable soul. So Krishna further later says that this consciousness or the soul is immutable, immovable, unburnt, uncut, it can never be wet, never be burnt by fire, and is always existing. It is never killed, cannot be killed. Just like we were saying before, somebody dead, who is determined dead medically, scientifically, comes back to life. How is that possible? Okay, so Srila Prabhupada says in terms of consciousness cannot be denied. A body without consciousness is dead. As soon as consciousness is removed from the body, the mouth will not speak, The eyes will not see, nor the ears hear. A child can understand that it is a fact that consciousness is absolutely necessary for the animation of the body. What is this consciousness? Just as heat and smoke are symptoms of life, so consciousness is the symptom of the soul. The energy of the soul, or self, is produced in the shape of consciousness. Indeed, consciousness proves that soul is present. That is not only the philosophy of Bhagavad Gita, but the conclusion of all Vedic literatures. So that is consciousness. We can perceive it by, just like we can perceive fire by seeing heat and smoke. It's a symptom of fire. Similarly, the consciousness is the symptom of the soul. The soul is localized within the heart, and it is spread throughout the body. So it is the energy of the soul, this consciousness. We are not consciousness. The consciousness is a symptom of the soul. We are the soul. So we are in these different states of consciousnesses. Consciousness of 18-year-old, 19-year-old, 20-year-old, such and such. So these are brought about by misidentification of body. So when the living entity, when the soul desires to enjoy separately from God, when one desires to enjoy separately from Krishna, then he has to take upon different states of consciousness, of a human being, of an animal, of this living entity, that living entity, in order to try to get that enjoyment. So his pure consciousness becomes perverted consciousness, just like when you put a light through a diffraction, it becomes different colors of light. You have the orange light, yellow light, blue light, but actually it's white light. So under this diffraction of this material world, you could say, under the influence of this material world, the living entity who is pure, because of the desire to enjoy separately from Krishna, becomes materially conscious and considers one to be this material body. Therefore, undergoes so many different states of temporary levels of consciousness. A consciousness in this life as a human being right now, I don't know, next life as an animal maybe, or next life as a plant, or such and such and such. These are all temporary states of consciousness. But our eternal state of consciousness is Krishna consciousness. The original state of the living being in its pure state, the pure consciousness of the living being, is Krishna consciousness. Krishna means the original, the super soul, the supreme soul, the personality of Godhead, who is supremely conscious. Krishna is a person, the all-attractive person. So when the living entity comes in touch with Krishna, or his Krishna consciousness, his identification as a servant of God, of Krishna, is reawakened again, then that is called Krishna consciousness. When he can serve, when he can no longer put himself in the center, but put Krishna in the center, and all of his thoughts, his activities, his life is centered around Krishna, that is called Krishna consciousness. So, Krishna consciousness is not a Hindu sect. It is not some religion, or is not just a faith. Prabhupada says here, there is a misconception that the Krishna consciousness movement represents a Hindu religion. In fact, however, Krishna consciousness is in no way a faith or religion that seeks to defeat other faiths or religion. Rather, it is an essential culture. It is an essential cultural movement for the entire human society, and does not consider any particular sectarian faith. The cultural movement is specially meant to educate people in how they can love God. So Krishna consciousness means God consciousness. The summum bonum, the attractor of all, Krishna, the source of everything, the source of pleasure, the source of creation, the source of everything. When we become conscious of Him, then that is called Krishna consciousness. Right now we are materially conscious, but this process of Krishna consciousness, that's why this word is it encapsulates and captures so many different aspects of the practice. But this process of Krishna consciousness reawakens that nature of the living entity, our natural nature of loving Krishna, being conscious of Krishna. So, as we move on, we'll understand this, what Krishna consciousness means more deeply. But for now, we'll end it there, and I'll see you in the next one. Hare Krishna.